And now I'm inviting our fireside chat speakers to the podium. This doesn't quite look like the fireside chat setup, but so what, just for efficiency. So our speakers are Dr. Schulman. Kevin Schulman is a professor of medicine at the Stanford School of Medicine in the area of Clinical Excellence Research Center, as well as GSB. He's also the new faculty director for the master's program in clinical informatics. Kevin is a health economist, and his recent publication in JAMA about LLMs provides deep insight, and it's going to be an exciting conversation with Greg Yap. Greg has been kind enough to join this. My dear friend and neighbor. Greg is a partner at Menlo Ventures, where he invests in teams trying to solve major problems in life science and healthcare. And he's got a special interest in novel therapeutic platforms, digital health, transformative technologies. Greg's done a lot of work for 20 years as an entrepreneur in life sciences and digital health. Thank you so much, both of you.
Well, thank you, Reena, and thank you to the organizers. We're thrilled to be here to get to talk a little bit about AI in healthcare and some of the impacts. And we were asked to talk a little bit, maybe more about some of the practical ideas. And so hopefully we'll get to cover that. But maybe first some introductions. As Reena mentioned, I'm Greg, partner at Menlo, and I focus a lot on investing in AI applications for both life sciences and for digital health. Our firm, Menlo Ventures, is quite active in investing in AI in everything from core infrastructure to a variety of different applications, which include consumer, enterprise software, cybersecurity and infrastructure, financial technologies, and then, of course, healthcare and life sciences. Thank you. And so we're really excited to be here. Kevin?
Well, thanks. And thanks again for inviting us. Really looking forward to this session. So I'm an internist, health services researcher, health economist, and I've been looking at technology for the last 2 decades or more as a solution to some of the economic challenges in healthcare. So I'm very interested in technology, but actually not from the data, the architecture side of how to build the technology, but how to think about deploying it. Well, maybe we'll start there. We had a little pre-meeting, what's going to be the impact of AI in healthcare? And, we're in the middle of the technology revolution, which is really exciting. Greg was telling me about all the great stuff they're investing in. And Daniel Kraft was just here talking about all the future of ways in which this can come together. And so, in class, I talked about this a couple of different ways. So one is to think about technology innovation. At a generation change like this is a really exciting time to pause and say, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why do we take care of patients this way? Do we need to take care of patients this way because the technology is going to stop us and make us ask those questions? Some of the times the technology actually works. It could actually do stuff, gives us new capabilities to do things a different way, and that's also really exciting. And you guys have been talking a lot about that, ways in which AI could do things that we never could have thought about 5 years ago. But when you think about Clay Christensen's ideas of disruptive innovation, technology innovation is not disruptive innovation. Okay, the technology innovation is coupled with business model innovation, and there we've seen a lot less discussion. So, we decided in 1964 how to pay for healthcare when we set up the Medicare program, and we pay for visits, and we pay for hospitalizations. There was no AI in 1964. And so where's the funding stream? We pay for E&M codes, which the doctor has to see the patient. We don't pay for digital visits, pure digital provided by a chatbot. So I think we're spending a lot of time on technology and the excitement of technology. I hear a lot less conversation on where's the revenue, where's the business model, how are we going to adjust this, and who's going to bring this to market? Is it Stanford that's going to deploy AI in everything we do, or is it Greg that's going to come to market with a solution that's going to put a lot of our services out of business?
Yeah, one of the things that I was telling Kevin before is that I think the biggest issue that we see in all of the companies that we hope to fund in digital health, obviously as an investor, you see hundreds of companies in a year. You can only invest in a few. But the number one reason why we don't invest in a company is really business model, right? The vast majority of companies we see are delivering some kind of benefit to patients, right? This is a very mission-driven industry, right? People are able to see unmet needs and then to try to create solutions that involve technology to address them. Most of those companies can save the healthcare system money. Our healthcare system, as you guys know, is very inefficient, right? And so being able to find areas of inefficiency and address them is actually not super hard to find. But the biggest issue that we see is that most companies have a hard time figuring out how they get paid for delivering that value, right? To the point that our healthcare system really does pay for time. And so things that save time are inherently not valued by our current payment systems, right? And so you have to figure out, how do you get bundled payments? How do you get value-based care? How do you use the fee-for-service codes, right, to be able to take the savings of time that you can deliver, but also be able to plug into the existing systems. And that's one of our fundamental tenets as investors, is we're looking for companies that can get paid both because of the value that they create, but also get paid in the world that we actually live in today, which is still predominantly fee-for-service.
Yeah, we were talking about this, and we want to make sure this is an optimistic talk. I run a master's program at Stanford. We have 25 students a year in the program, and they all want to solve problems with technology. They're very excited about technology, but that's the beginning of a really long journey. And I think it's really hard for people to understand, wait, my solution does this amazing things. Like, no one's ever been able to do this before. Why is it that people don't stand up and try and figure that out? Thinking about the basic business model, you're going to sell to hospitals, insurers, or you're going to sell to consumers. The vehicle that you're going to do it is, are we going to do a One Medical, do a standalone service delivery, because that way we could build AI into that to make that better. So I think that the landscape of the different business models really is an interesting question. We don't have a great, it's kind of, I imagine you're jealous of the other partners. Like, look at how AI is helping this industry or that industry. It's really hard to point to examples of where AI has really, created unicorns in healthcare. But we need to do that. The healthcare system is so broken. As if you look at the fiscal realities of the deficit and future spending, if we don't create these solutions and we don't force these changes in the market, we're going to be in real trouble.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing early promising companies in the space for sure, right? But one of the things you mentioned, Kevin, that I like is for entrepreneurs in the audience, right? If you're thinking about your business, it's never too early to start thinking about the business model, right? That's actually more important in my view than actually getting the care model right, than getting the technology right. If you don't have a business model, then we always talk about is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Is there going to be something valuable that you've created at the end of the day? If you do all the work to build something amazing, right, is there actually going to be something of value at the end of it? And that really goes to business model. And so you mentioned, as your entrepreneurs that you're working with are thinking about these things early, right? You cannot think about business model early enough, in my view, in starting a company.
Actually, let me put you on the spot as you're thinking about teams and founding teams. What do you do if people just have a technology background compared to, do they need to have a healthcare person at the table that understands the market?
Yes. I'm being a little bit glib and simplistic there, but I do think understanding why things are broken in the way that they are broken, right, is something that's core to being able to build a business, right? And if you don't understand healthcare, if you've lived healthcare as a consumer, but you actually haven't lived it from the inside, then you can still entrepreneur in healthcare. There's some amazing healthcare entrepreneurs who are not healthcare people themselves, but find partners, right? You can find, that can be on the medical side, that can be on the business side, that can be on the product side. You know, healthcare is a team sport, right? It is in every part of it, right? And so solving problems in healthcare, solving big problems in healthcare requires a diversity of experiences.
I focus obviously a lot on the U.S. healthcare system because it's so broken. I really want us to fix it. But there are other healthcare systems around the world where people are facing real challenges. And I think it's a really exciting time because we're actually seeing people leapfrog, in other markets, proving out these technology solutions, and then we could always bring them back. We've done that for a long time with medical devices, but I think there's really interesting plays around the world where people are taking the rhetoric that we have, like we could use technology to do X, and they're able to test that out in other markets, actually deliver services. I have former students in Nairobi, Kenya, that have a company that's got about 1.2 million patients, almost all the commercially insured patients in Nairobi, use their platform. So, I don't think we need to be limited to how do we deploy it here. We could build out test cases and use cases in lots of different markets.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd say the other thing, and maybe one of the other topics that we wanted to make sure to cover is kind of talk about some of the areas that we're excited about, areas with opportunity and also areas with some risk. And so maybe I can start and say I think we've seen a lot of interest in the administrative workflows of healthcare, and to talk about where are the first bigger companies likely to come from, right? That's an area where generative AI, how do you fill in some of the workflows on the billing side, on the administrative side? That's an area where there's an enormous amount of time spent today. We're seeing tons of companies, in fact, in some cases, too many companies in a particular segment that need to figure out their differentiation, in those areas. I'd say the growing area of interest is really in the clinical workflows, right, of being able to actually deliver better care through AI. This is where I think the consumer mind goes to immediately, but the demand for accuracy and the demand for being, doing no harm to the patients is super important. And so that's, I think, an area that is lagging in terms of time, but is certainly not lagging in terms of investor interest today.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought up administrative costs. So, you look in the literature, David Cutler, Will Schrank says we're wasting $250 billion a year in administrative costs. That's a number big enough for even people out here to pay attention to. But, we wrote a paper a couple months ago that, AI is not going to solve that problem. So there are 318,000 different health plans in the U.S. market. Each health plan decides their own benefit, structure, their own payment models. And so, this is going to be a really interesting question. Can technology really solve this? If we're throwing technology at a jelly roll, it's still going to be a jelly roll. And so I think this will be an area, I know people are really excited about this, but we wrote basically we got to solve the underlying business process. We're trying and scope this out actually as a project at the business school right now. Like, what would it take to really transform this market? In the Netherlands has a private multi-payer system, and their transaction costs in healthcare are 10% of what ours are. So you can do it, we just haven't done it. We're talking about exciting areas. We're going to have a paper come out in September talking about the digitally enabled visit and all the services that you should be getting that you don't get. So before you go to see the doctor, you don't have any tools to help you organize your thoughts, to help you organize your records, to think about what questions you want to ask the doctor. How many of you have left the doctor's office and say, oh my gosh, I forgot to ask that question? Why is that? We could fix that. But the area that I think is going to be the most interesting is after the visit. So there's a whole set of post-visit services that you should get. Like when I write you a script and tell you to go take this medicine, why do you get a piece of paper and not a TikTok video, if we're allowed to use TikTok anymore? But, maybe Instagram. But why is it not in your language? Why is it not at your reading level? So now that we have all these tools, we can actually provide these services that have never been available to us. So instead of filling my inbox with messages, how do I take that medication? Do I take it with meals? What do I do if I have a rash? You know, I could give you a whole menu of self-service things that would help you take care of that. That doesn't exist right now. The payment model doesn't exist for it to really, don't go out and write a business plan about it because no one wants to pay you for it. But those are things as consumers that we should get and demand from the healthcare system.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do think that's the promise of generative AI, right, is to be able to personalize all of these interactions. In some ways, it's the natural extension of the move towards verticalized workflow software, right? You know, every pitch that I get these days, like the entrepreneur is trying to talk about their use of AI. You know, and frankly, you know, sometimes it gets wearying to hear, you know, everyone talk about their AI platform. You know, and honestly, many of them, you know, it isn't really it's not really technology forward, and so that's the other thing I would encourage people is to you know, embrace what it is that you're doing well, right? AI can be a component of solving a customer's problem, but I think these are examples of focus on the problem that you're trying to solve, right? How do you get better aftercare? How do you get better pre-care? How do you get better follow-up? Right, and then the tools that you're using, you know, some of those will be high tech, some of those will be low tech, but this is the point of business model first, right? Solve that problem, figure out how you get paid for that problem, you know, and then the technology, the right technology solution for that problem.
Yeah, kind of to circle back, you know, one of the things that's really interesting at Stanford right now is there's several different themes of faculty research asking the question, how do we understand innovation as a reproducible and scalable process? And that, you know, that's a, you know, Stanford's got the design school as one way of thinking, but there are lots of other theories now about how do we do it, and all of it revolves around the business model. You know, how does this work in other, you know, I like to look at other sectors. My class actually, I teach a class called Health, IT, and Strategy, and the first lectures actually have nothing to do with health, well, one has, but have nothing to do with healthcare. But one of the big ones is like Facebook. How do you think about networks? So look at the value that networks have created in every aspect of your life, and we use networks not at all in healthcare. So I think at a conceptual level, there are lots of business models that could exist, could really help us a lot. You know, so, you know, in terms of networks, one of the first projects the student team ever came up with was for patients who get a transplant, have a family network that helps them take their medicines, you know, and rotate. So you get a notification if the patient didn't take their medicine Monday morning and their sister calls them, and the next day their aunt calls them and their mother calls them. You know, that's a network. It's a network effect. We do everything else in our life in networks, and almost never do you see an intervention in healthcare networks.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe this is one moment to say, from a practical standpoint, I'll advertise for our own. We're running a digital health founders fellowship. We ran it for the first time last year, and we're going to redo it again. But this idea of, it's never too early to think about business models. We brought together 30 early stage founders, kind of seed through Series A founders who were wanting to be with a group of fellow founders and also get a chance to interact with people from FDA, from payers, from providers, employers, other founders who are at later stages of their growth trajectory. And so that's kind of the goal, was to help people work on some of these issues in a collaborative setting, and then also be able to get people to keep in touch and to share some of these war stories. So I do think that the goal of groups like Kevin's and groups like that we've started is to help people find, there's so many problems to be solved in this space. You know, how do you find common, you know, a set of fellow travelers to work on these issues together?
Yeah, in terms of the innovation models, you know, one of the things that we push really hard is defining the problem. And you really have to own and become expert in the problem, whether it's a clinical problem, an administrative problem, a workflow problem. You know, how do you really understand that from a variety of different perspectives? It's the amazing thing, I came from Duke to Stanford 6 years ago, you know, and at Duke we would write a business plan But at Stanford, actually, our students go run around all over campus and go interview people. They'll come back with 40 or 50 interviews before they'll actually even put pen to paper about what the solution is. So you can't spend enough time really understanding the problem. Now, I'll push them and say, where's the money behind it? And how do we understand that piece of it? It's very easy in a clinical workflow. It's very easy if I'm going to develop a new pedicle screw to do that and say, well, the surgeon likes it, so someone will pay for it. But I think the kinds of solutions we're talking about, you're really trying to get deeply integrated into a business, an operating business model, and frankly, you're being inundated with these things. Stanford's being inundated with these things. Imagine being the CIO of Stanford and you have 1,000 people that want to pilot their thing at your place. How do you ever, it's not your job, and you don't have a pathway to do that. So trying to figure out why people should pay attention to what you're doing, how to get that, how to get some early success, key wins that really make people understand that you're providing real value that can help them solve a problem. I think those are really tackling difficult problems to solve.
Yeah, I appreciate you just mentioning 50 customer interviews, right? I do think that's a discipline that some people, some of the entrepreneurs that we meet with are really great at, and others, frankly, could spend more time to really go out and the answers are not in the building when you're an entrepreneur. The answers are with your customers, right? So I think that's a really fantastic thing to do.
Yeah, I think we're getting close to the end here, and I think this is like such an exciting time. I had a class that came into our master's program last year that when they applied to the program, ChatGPT didn't exist. It's just amazing to see, and you could see it in real time. I work a lot with computer science students. What they're able to do today is beyond, you couldn't imagine 2 years ago. And so the technology is moving really quickly. I think us as leaders in the field, as people interested, really have to help shape it. We need this to be successful. I can't emphasize that enough. But there are lots of things that go into making sure it's successful.
Yeah. And maybe my last piece of advice on that, I do think we've got access to these amazing foundational models. You mentioned ChatGPT. We're big investors in Anthropic, also investors in Pinecone, which does retrieval augmented generation, which makes the LLMs much more accurate, Unstructured, which does structuring of data for these AI training models. But I think the point I would leave you with is that these models are incredibly powerful. They make a lot of things possible, but the models themselves are commoditizing, right? The access to these models is not likely to differentiate the companies that the entrepreneurs would want to build, right? It is a combination of training data, right? Do you have exclusive access to data which allows your model to deliver more accurate results? And is that data proprietary? Right, these are some of the questions that you should challenge yourself with. And then the other thing is really just workflow integration, right? That these are to answer the problem, to get paid for the answer to the problem. These are questions that the AI layers that you and your competitors will have will be essentially equivalent. Right? It's the application of those AI layers that will differentiate I think the next generation of application-oriented entrepreneurs from each other, because the model itself, the whiz-bang, the exciting part of, oh my gosh, it can personalize the answer to the question, that's something that everyone will have access to because of the work of groups like OpenAI and Anthropic.
Great.
So maybe that's the right place to stop. Thank you guys for having us. Happy to chat with people afterwards.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.